Well, good evening and welcome to Casa Bacardi and this first of a series on Cubans in America dedicated to a very distinguished lawyer, entrepreneur, Cesar Alvarez, who is the chairman of Greenberg Traurig, has made a significant contribution to this community, and we are proud that this series is named for him. We also want to thank a very generous philanthropic individual, a friend of the university, a friend of us, that has given us funding to organize this series and other activities. He would like to remain anonymous, but we are very grateful for his support. It's very important, no? This series is the result of a epiphany that I had visiting Australia and walking down Sydney, and I see a two-story building, and it says, "The Jewish Experience in Australia." That says Jewish experience. How many Jews can there be in Australia? Well, it happens that there were 200 families that migrated before World War II and after World War II to Australia. And in order for the children and the grandchildren to remember their activities, their successes, and so on, created this museum. I want to call it a museum, but it's a museum about the Jewish experience in Australia. And I said to my wife, who was next to me, says, in Miami we have 1.5 million Cubans. Why don't we have a place for our children and grandchildren to learn what happened in the past 50 years? So I started by doing a video that some of you may have purchased, Cuba from Columbus to Castro. And if you didn't purchase it, it's all going to be out there for purchase after, which is a short history of the country, the Cuba, for our children and grandchildren in English, so they can understand what happened in Cuba and why the Cubans are here. The second part of this, it was done through this generous donation to create a series of interviews with prominent Cuban Americans. We are recording all of these interviews. We are sending them to the library to keep them there, and anybody that wants a copy will be happy to give a copy free of charge. So we have today a very prominent Cuban American that has done well in the area of politics as well as in the area of business, Secretary Carlos Gutierrez. Carlos and I have been friends since the Bush administration, I guess. No?
Even before.
Even before that. And we developed a very close relationship. He's a hell of a guy, besides being a good politician and a good businessman. All right, so basically this is the way we're going to proceed. I'm going to ask Carlos a number of questions about his background and so on, and then I'm going to open it for the public to ask questions. You want to ask him anything, he may not want to answer, but you can ask him anything. He'll answer anything. Okay. First question. Tell me about your childhood. You were born in Cuba. What part of Cuba?
Havana.
Havana.
Born in Havana. We left in July of 1960.
What about your mic?
Take the mic.
Perdón. Havana, and we left in July of 1960.
What were your parents doing in Cuba?
My father was 40, so he was an entrepreneur. He had a 25% stake in a company called Empacadora Majagua in Ciego de Ávila. So they had pineapple, and they canned it and they shipped it. So it was a small growing business. It was obviously we left it all. And on my mother's side, it's a curious thing, but my grandfather spent 57 years in the Cuban telephone company. And he started as office boy, and he made it to the top. So it was very two different experiences, two different families.
Was that an inspiration to you?
I think the inspiration was more on my father's side. Even though I can tell you that my father died a poor man, and he tried to recreate what he had in Cuba. He opened up businesses in Mexico. They went out of business. He had a very hard time, very hard time.
So did you go to school in Cuba, primary education?
I went to a school called Lestonac in Cuba, de monjas.
They didn't convert you?
For a little while, yeah.
All right. So you arrived in the United States in the 1960s.
July 1960, right when Eisenhower took away the sugar quota.
Okay. You went to Miami?
Miami, we went to a hotel on Collins Avenue called the Richmond, which is still there. And they still have the same logo. And it's unbelievable. So I didn't speak a word of Spanish. My brother was a little older, and he spoke a little bit of English. I didn't speak a word of English. So the bellboy used to teach me English. And he'd say, look, rubber band, and he'd go, rubber band. And that's how I started. Eventually, as time went by, because we thought we were on vacation. This guy can't last. I mean, we'll be back soon, And after a while, my father said, look, I have to find a job. And you have to go to school. And so he started parking cars in a parking lot, and little by little, and I was put into school called Treasure Island Elementary School in Key Biscayne. And I remember the first 3 months were tough because I didn't speak English. But that's one way to learn English. You put somebody in school, you say, yeah, you learn, and that's it, because they didn't have bilingual education. So we spent 2 years. 2 years in Miami, and then we moved to New York City because he got a better job in New York City. Not that it was a great job, but it was a better job than what he had in Miami. So we became citizens in New York City. And then he got a job in Mexico City. And that's when the whole family moved to Mexico City. And the job in Mexico City was with Heinz. En México es Alimentos Heinz o Del Fuerte. So we moved to Mexico City. I went to junior high school, university, started my career with Kellogg's in Mexico. My wife is Mexican. 2 of my 3 children were born in Mexico. One is here, in Querétaro, Mexico. So that was the experience. But the other incredible thing is Heinz went broke in Mexico. So once again, we were on the road, And a lot of it was they went broke because of, I don't know if you know Mexican politics, but Echeverria's policies were terrible. And they were terrible for business. And so once again, the business went down the drain, and we went to Fort Lauderdale.
How did you start with Kellogg? And why did you start with Kellogg?
I had in Mexico, I had a FM2, which is a residency paper. I wasn't a Mexican citizen, and it was very difficult to become a Mexican citizen. So it was hard to find a job if you weren't a Mexican. Even though I had working papers, people didn't know the law. They said, you're not Mexican, I can't give you a job. So a friend of mine, a high school friend of mine, his father was the general manager of Kellogg's. He said, look, we can put you in a training program, a sales training program, and see how it goes. So that's how I started in sales, selling what they call in Mexico changarros, which bodegas, selling out of a Volkswagen van. It's a real story. I have a picture of it. Selling out of a Volkswagen van to little stores. But what I was looking for was exactly the opposite of what my father was looking for. He wanted independence, his own business. He didn't want to work for anybody. And I saw that, and I said, I want stability. And what better stability than a big U.S. company? So that's why I joined Kellogg, and I did my best to stick it out and stick it through. 2 years after I was there, the general manager, whose son I knew was fired. So after that, I was on my own and just had to, work my way up.
Yeah, but it's very interesting that a Cuban American with limited experience in the food business all of a sudden becomes the chairman of Kellogg.
Yeah, no,
And this is important because this is important for younger people that are entrepreneurs, that want to move up, that want to do well. How about your experience?
Yeah, the food business, I always felt that I wanted to go to the food business because my father was in the food business, right? He was in the pineapple business. So I was attracted to the food business. I didn't think I was going to be chairman. I mean, if you asked me when I was driving a Volkswagen van, hey, you think you're going to be chairman? I wanted to be a supervisor, a sales supervisor in Mexico. And I said, maybe one day I could be a divisional manager. And who knows, one day maybe I could be a national sales manager of Kellogg in Mexico. So what I learned now, I look back, is I took it step by step. I have a job, do it well, good things happen. But I wasn't always thinking about, tomorrow.
How long did it take you to become chairman?
25 years.
Any resistance to a Cuban being a chairman, moving up? Did you have somebody throwing darts at you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, en primer lugar, I don't have a college degree. So 20 years ago, I wouldn't have had the guts to say that, okay? And I still have nightmares about not having, not making it to the final exam and not the. So I had to compete. And I remember one time after I had become general manager of Kellogg Mexico, I had been in the company for 8 years. I spent 5 years as that. I told my boss, I said, I want to move. I've been here for 5 years. I think I've done a good job. And he said, where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to one of the big Anglo markets. Okay, at Kellogg, the big sophisticated markets were the Anglo markets. That's people eat more cereal, there's more competition. And he was surprised. He said, what do you mean? You don't want to be president of Latin America? And he kept asking me these types of questions. And I finally realized what he was saying is,
you're Latino.
You're a Latin. Why don't you lead Latins? You can't lead Anglos. So, yeah, of course. I mean, throughout, it's not something that people walk up to you and say, you're Latino, you can't be in a U.S. corporation. But after a while, you sense, you have an instinct for it. You sense who likes you, who doesn't, and, you learn to develop a sixth sense.
How was that experience as chairman of a major corporation?
Bueno, mira, my first 18 months were a disaster. I'm lucky that the board believed in me enough to say, let's give this guy a little bit more time. I brought in a guy from McKinsey who was the number 2 in his MBA class at Harvard. Okay, just a guy who was to show the board that I'm not afraid to surround myself with these people. And the guy turned out to be a terrible manager. If you put 15 things in front of him and said, pick 3, he couldn't do it. He wanted to do all 15. So he couldn't manage, he couldn't lead. He drove the company nuts. I had to fire him after a year and a half. I brought in some other people, I had to fire them. And we had consultants, and I could stand up and give a speech about our strategy, but I didn't feel it. And it wasn't until about 18 months later, and I remember using Martí's phrase, our wine is bitter, but it's our wine. So we said, you know what? Throw out all the consultants, and we're going to do our own charts. And our charts are clunky, but they're our charts. And, the thoughts don't have a lot of buzzwords, but there are thoughts. And that's when things started to turn around, when I started following my gut and not trying to overthink things or not trying to have a consultant come in and tell me what the business should be. But the first, I'll tell you, and then because people knew I had been in Mexico, my first decision was to close down the original plant that Mr. Kellogg had built.
In Mexico?
No, in Battle Creek, Michigan. So somebody had to do it. It was a terrible plant. It was not productive, old. It was just, its time had come. But because we all lived in Battle Creek, and Battle Creek was a town of 30,000 people, everybody, they didn't go near it. And I said, if I have the job, I'm going to do it. And if I don't do it, somebody else will. So I did it. And for the next, Karina, you remember, you were in junior high school, but the rumors were this Mexican guy is going to move the headquarters to Mexico. For the first 2.5 years, I would say. It wasn't easy. I remember one Halloween when we opened the door, trick or treat, we opened the door, the guy said, "Thanks for firing my uncle." And so we weren't very popular in Battle Creek for the first 2.5 years. At the end of the day, it worked. And I spent 6 years as CEO, and when I left, people said thank you, but it wasn't an easy time.
So from that, you went into politics.
I went into politics, yeah. And
Why?
I was not involved in politics. I was a Republican because my father told me I was a Republican. But I wasn't involved. I was interested. I was interested. I read. But I wasn't engaged. And I met President Bush in 1998 when he was starting his campaign. And then when he became president, I received a call from the White House saying, "Would you like to serve as something?" And I said, "Look, I just took over Kellogg. The place is a disaster. I can't leave. I just can't do it." I think they were thinking about a commission or something. And so 4 years went by, and President Bush came to Battle Creek to give a speech in his campaign for the second term. And the incredible thing is, he's always on time or early. He arrived in Battle Creek early to give a speech at a baseball stadium. And at the end of the speech, I was in a line with, the local people, and he came up to me, he said, "Carlos, are you going to join the team this time?" And I said, "Well, Mr. President, I haven't been asked, but I can't say no to you." Se me ocurrió decir eso. I didn't, So I was walking out, and I told a friend of mine, "You know what? I think the president just offered me a job." He said, "Look," he says that to everybody. A week later, my assistant comes in and says, "You have a call from the White House." Oh, my God. The important thing, two things. One is the business was better, and two, I had a successor. If I didn't have that, I couldn't just walk out and say, "Hey, good luck." And the successor I had was somebody who was on the board, who I brought in thinking about, you have two succession plans. One is, what if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? And the other one is, who's going to be the guy 10, 15 years from now, or the woman 10, 15 years from now? And I got hit by the Commerce bus, but I'm glad I had a successor, and the business was doing better. But they're so good at the White House. The personnel people are so good. Before you know it, you're sitting in the Oval Office, and you can't say no, and it's. But something in my gut said, "Go for it," And there are times when your mind fails you, but your gut rarely does. And my brain was saying, "You're crazy." I remember your sister, when she found out that I was taking a 95% pay cut, she said, "Daddy, what's wrong? Are you nuts? Are you crazy?" So, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And I'll tell you, after having been through the first 2 years, the first 2.5 years at Kellogg, that were so difficult, and then getting out of that, it started to feel routine. The quarterly numbers, the annual budget, And I didn't realize until I got to Washington that I wasn't as professionally satisfied as I thought. Because I got to Washington, and I used to check the stock price of Kellogg 30 times a day. You know, I'd turn around, press enter, and it would update the stock price, just out of habit. The first day I was at Commerce, you said, what's the stock price of Kellogg? I don't know. I forgot about Kellogg because the government absorbs you. So the best job I've ever had was Commerce, was government.
What was the worst thing that happened to you at Commerce?
I would say two things. One is when we lost immigration, when we didn't get immigration reform passed. And the other one was when Nancy Pelosi went against the president and decided not to put the Colombia Free Trade Agreement up for a vote. And knowing what Colombia was going through with the FARC and you know, just and the job that President Uribe was doing and how much they deserved it, you know, those two were real disappointments.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship with President Bush, what kind of guy he was.
Yeah, President Bush is, you know, he is who he is. You could see it. There's no air. Somebody was once telling me, he said, President Bush, when he's talking to you, he will never break into French. You know, he's not that kind of a guy. He won't throw out a French word just to sound sophisticated. So the first time I met him, I was with my wife and the president, or the candidate. And first he said, I like your shoes. That was the first thing he said to me. I like your shoes. And,
did he take him off? Did he take him off you?
No, he didn't. But he's a regular guy. He's an extrovert, very much an extrovert. So he likes to speak Spanish, and like all good extroverts, he doesn't mind making mistakes. And that's why he's been able to learn Spanish. He doesn't speak as good as Jeb, but he speaks Spanish, even though he used to call me Carlositos. Pero, you know, the reality is that the Secretary of Commerce is a big job, but it's not one of the big four. You know, it's not defense, state, the Attorney General, and what's the fourth? Treasury. Huh? So I would see him, I don't know, maybe once, twice, 3 times a month. You know, I wasn't in his office every day. But he was always just a great guy, and he was a leader. So you know, I remember in 2006, right in the middle of the war in Iraq, right in the middle of the worst time in Iraq, he would walk into a cabinet meeting and he'd pick people up. Come on, don't get down. We're going to work this out. We're going to get through this. And I don't want anybody, you know, looking like they're sad. Unbelievable. And when things got bad, he made himself more visible. And I've seen a lot of leaders that when things get bad, they shut the door of their office and they don't want to see anybody. He was just the opposite. He's an amazing guy. So, and I think he got a very bad rap by the press. He's a guy who read a tremendous amount. He had incredible political instincts. He was able to make instinctive political decisions very quickly. And he surrounded himself with very, very good people. You know, Karl Rove, he had a lot of very good people around him, and very loyal, because he never said go that way, and then when he realized it was politically dangerous, he'd leave you over there and he'd go this way. Never. He'd never do that to his people. So his people were tremendously loyal to him.
One of the things you got involved as the Secretary of Commerce was in Cuba policy and in developing a study about Cuba.
Yeah, that was, for me, was like, you know, it was a dream, because there was a commission that was formed with Mel Martinez and Colin Powell. So I went on that commission with Condi, and I got very involved, and Condi was amazing. because she said, look, Cuba, I have 1,000 things to think about. You go ahead and do Cuba. So, I mean, the experiences that we had were just amazing. You know, we had conference calls with the First Lady and dissidents at the intersection. I don't know how many cell phones we sent down there. It was fantastic. You know, just being in national security meetings and talking. And that was the time when Fidel got sick and people said he was dying. And I got to tell you, Brian, is Brian Littell here?
No, he's not.
So the CIA would come in my office and they go, we have some news for you. He's still alive, but he's very sick. Oh, boy, that's great. I mean, how did you get that information? How did you know? So nobody knew, and every day it was a rumor, and we had, it's still classified, but we had a flow chart of, you know, what would we do the day he died, and what would happen, and what would Cuba be like, and so that was a very exciting, and that's when I got involved with you, and really regained a curiosity about Cuba that I had as you know, when I was younger, but afterwards I started reading about business and started reading about other things and studying, and but when I got to commerce is when I really just became a fanatic, a voracious reader about the history of Cuba, starting with Jaime's book.
I didn't want to plug, but that's all right. I'll take it. Any desire to go back to government?
I don't want to say no, just in case I don't get invited back. I would go back in the right position, you know. I wouldn't go back just to go back. But the right challenge, and I'm not talking about the right level, but the right challenge, something that would keep me challenged, excited. You know, if there's one thing that I think I've earned is the opportunity to do what I like. So if there's something I like, I would go for it.
How about that against chairman of another big company?
I don't know if I want that. I don't know. I mean, you know.
Your wife is not spending enough money.
No. No, you know, when I first left government, it's not like I had 20 offers. I had a few offers. One thing I said is I will never again live in a small town. Battle Creek, Michigan is a tough place. 30,000 people, and it's just after a while, it was a great place to raise a family. But after a while, you felt like, so I said, I'll never again go back to a town, to a suburb. I wanted to be in New York, in Washington, in Miami. But I'll tell you, now looking back at the Kellogg experience, it was a pressure cooker for 30 years. Okay, so I wasn't a Mexican, so if I lost that job, I wouldn't be able to live in Mexico, even though my wife was Mexican and I had a son who was Mexican. I didn't have a college degree, so my goodness, if this guy worked 10 hours, I had to work 16. And I knew that I had to get the numbers because my protection was that I got the numbers. That's how I could say, okay, look, you don't like my education, but look at my numbers. So it was a 30-year pressure cooker. I don't remember one day where I said, well, today is going to be a great day. It just every single day. Do I want to do that again? I don't know. I really don't know.
All right, who are you supporting for president?
Jeb.
Okay.
You know, I'm very proud of Marco. I mean, I supported Jeb before Marco decided to run. I have a certain loyalty towards the Bush family. I like the Bush family. I like what they learn at the dinner table. I like the type of people they are. Their values. They don't. Even though W had a swagger, He never bragged. Jeb doesn't brag. 41 doesn't brag. You know, they're a special family. And I do feel a sense of loyalty towards President Bush. So, you know, it's not easy because sometimes I think, my God, I'm Cuban American. I'm not supporting a Cuban American. But I think loyalty is important.
Now, one issue that you're involved and you've been very interested in is the issue of immigration.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think we should do? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, eventually something has to happen because there are three things to immigration. One is border security. And border security is a buzzword. Porque border security, 40% of the people who are here undocumented came through airports. So the idea of we have to build a fence in the borders is just, it's a talking point. The second thing is, what do you do with 12 million people who are here, who don't have working papers, but many of them have children who think they're American? Many have been here for 10, 20, 15, 20 years. I think that the consensus is we're not going to round up 12 million people and kick them out, but we're not going to give them a passport either. So what do you do? And that's where the tension is. The third thing is the most important one, but it's the one that people talk the least about, is what is the legal immigration system? Because the reason we have illegal immigration is because our laws don't work. Our laws were made in the 1950s, and we're trying to apply them, you know, in the 21st century. So, for example, in the Senate bill that was done under Marco, the quota for agricultural workers is 112,000 per year. If you talk to an agricultural farmer, they'll tell you we need from 750,000 to 1 million. So where do you get the other 900,000? Either you shut down your farm, you move it to Mexico, or you hire someone who's undocumented. The quota for construction workers is 15,000. Every time I hear that, I say, we need 15,000 in Miami, not nationwide. The quota for PhDs, MBAs, what they call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, is they took it up to about 90,000. The 90,000 is taken up by the month of February. That's why Microsoft is building R&D centers in Vancouver, because they can't find the people in the U.S. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough truck drivers. It's an economic fact. So if the working force is not growing, the only way you can grow your economy is through productivity. And you can't have 3-4% productivity every year. So it's just a reality of life. Without immigration, our population doesn't grow. If our population doesn't grow, our economy begins to decline. It's what's happening in Japan. It's what's happening in the European Union and many countries. China, it's going to happen to China in about 20 years, where the population gets too old and you don't have enough young people to support the population. And you don't have enough people to support the economic growth.
So what is the likelihood that we're going to have some sort of an agreement on immigration?
Look, I think there's an important thing here, and I think this is where Jeb is right. I think Jeb is right. And he was criticized a little bit in his book. I don't know how many of you have seen his book, but Jeb talks about legalization. Okay, so if you pass a background check and if you pay a fine and if you, all these things, you can be legal, which means you can work. It means you can go home and come back, but it doesn't say anything about citizenship. In fact, perhaps you can't become a citizen, but you can work here. The Senate bill broke a law that broke a rule that both parties had, and that is if you're going to legalize people and make them citizens, they should not cut into the line. So if you say everyone can have a green card in 10 years, you're essentially cutting into the line. So Jeb's idea is, look, you're legal, but we have a process for citizenship. And if you want to be a citizen, go to the process. If you're from the Philippines, that can take you 80 years because the line is so long. If you're from, I don't know, if you're from Germany, maybe it's quicker. So I think that's a distinction. And this is where politics becomes very cynical. One party says, no, we don't want second-class citizens. If there isn't a path to citizenship, no reform. Well, path to citizenship happens in 15 years. And in the bill that we had, it was 14 to 18 years. So if you asked an undocumented immigrant, do you want to kill this bill because in 15 years you can't be a citizen? Or do you want this bill because tomorrow you can be legal? And when you go to work, you know you're going to come back to see your family. I think he'd say, make me legal. In 1986, when President Reagan did his so-called amnesty, only 46% chose to become U.S. citizens. Because people wanted to go back. They want to go back home. They want to make U.S. dollars, go back to their hometown and build a little house and be a hero. And, you know, and the world is there's a lot more mobility and circularity. People come, they work in the summer, they go back home in the winter. So this thing of citizenship, that's why some people cynically say that, what do they call them? They say that illegal immigrants are also called undocumented Democrats. Because, you know, the theory is they're going to vote Democrat, so let's make them citizens. And I find that very cynical, that you deny them legalization because you want them to be able to vote for you in 15 years. And it's so easy to demagogue the issue, you know. The Republicans want you to be a second-class citizen. It took me 14 years to get citizenship for my wife and for my son, for just because of things, you know, the way circumstantial, the way things happened. That's you know.
Okay, Carlos, I can't let you go without asking you a question. How do you feel about Obama's Cuba policy?
Boy, this was going so great. There was, you know, when I heard it, and it's interesting because I was probably a list of 50 people, and 30 minutes before I got a call from Penny Pritzker. They say, oh, I want to tell you, Secretary, and you're going to like the news that we're going to do this and announce this tonight. And I went on CNN that afternoon, and I said, you know, Cuba got a very good deal. And we lost we gave everything. We gave everything and got nothing. So up until now, all the regulations have been issued from the U.S. side, and travel and the credit cards, and what regulations have come out of Cuba. And the interesting thing that's happened, and this may be one of the positive things, is that Cuba is getting overwhelmed with businesses that want to go in, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. They're afraid of losing control. And that's going to be something to watch. You know, they've agreed that Cubans can open small businesses. And I think for Cubans, that's great. And that one day they can aspire to buy a house. You know, I don't care who made the policy. I'm glad that Cubans can start their own business now. But they don't know what to do with big companies. They just don't know what to do. But they've opened the box. So it's going to be interesting to watch. My prediction is that President Obama will submit the embargo for a vote, because it's his only chance for a legacy, and he knows that he's built the sandcastle. The next president's going to come in, and he's not going to have the same passion to just give and give and give and not get anything in return. So it was interesting, the day that it happened, CNN was saying Cubans in Havana are celebrating after December 17. What they didn't know is they were celebrating because of the 5 spies, not because we're now friends with the U.S., you know. And a lot of people don't understand it. They think that it means that that's it. It's all over. We can do business now. But so there's a lot of naivety around this, and I don't know what else is going to come. But I am convinced that President Obama wants to do it, and he is going to do as much as he can. Even though the Cubans are saying, no, you're not doing enough. You can do more. You know, it's almost as if though we're begging them to let us be their friend. And we know there's a history, right? Eisenhower, Ford, Carter, Clinton, the closer you get, the more you regret it. And I'm just wondering when the day will come when Obama will realize that this wasn't what he thought it was.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Let's open it for the